Okay, so once again, good morning everyone and welcome to our midterm period. So the topic for today is about project scope management, no? So as we recall with chapter 1, no, that the several factors are associated with project success. Many of these factors such as user involvement, clear business objectives, and minimize of clearly defined scope and firm basic requirements are elements of project scope statement. So Liban, the project manager at Killer Graduate School of the Management, cite the lack of proper project definition in scope as the main reason why project fail. So one of the most important and most difficult aspect of project management, therefore, is defining the scope of the project. Okay, so to discuss with us the detailed about the project scope, let us all welcome Sir Florent Bautista. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so once again, if you have some questions with our presenter, do not hesitate to post your question in our chat box. Okay, so kindly listen and understand the presentation about project scope management by Sir Bautista.
Hi guys, I'm Torrente Bautista and I am fourth year BSIT. So today we will discuss the project scope management. So without further ado, let's get started. So PSM or project scope management is the process of ensuring that project work comprises only of work needed to complete the project successfully. The project manager has to keep in mind that there is no gold plating, double check that no extra work has been added in order to see what is in and what is out of the project. Manager evaluates requirements against the business case and then ranks and prioritize them. So basically, managing the project scope is primarily concerned with defining and controlling what is in and what is not included in a project. Yeah, next one. So here's the example of project scope management plan. So plan scope management, this is where we largely focus on how to plan the scope management activities or project. Collect requirements, the process of determining, documenting, and managing stakeholder needs and requirements to meet their project objectives. This is definitely one of the important process where we reach out the stakeholders or to stakeholders to identify their needs and requirements based on the requirements that we have gathered. Next one, define scope. The process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. We define scope and we ensure that whatever it is defined in the scope, you only work on those items and not something which is not the part of the scope. Next, create VBS. So VBS, the process of subdividing project deliverables and project into smaller, more manageable components. So creating VBS process certainly give us an idea about what are the low-level activities, task packages, work packages that we have to work a pound. So creating of VBS is definitely one of the important process within the scope management that we have. Next one, validate scope. The process of formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverables. Validate scope against the acceptance criteria that is defined between you and the customer for each deliverables that you are producing by the end of each phase in the project life cycle. It's important to define very clearly the acceptance criteria, and then lastly we have the control scope. The process of monitoring the status of the project and product scope and managing changes to the scope baseline. So control scope, this is where basically see how do we control effectively the changes that might happen to the scope management plan and how do we go about managing these changes. Yeah, next one. So project scope management has three process. So we have planning here, controlling, and closing. So planning, planning the project is defined and the work or process needed to deliver the project is determined. So we basically need to do planning, and this is exactly to try to understand how we are planning to do our project, so we will basically understand. So after we plan here and making sure that the project we're doing is okay, we need to control. And this is controlling. Controlling involves tracking, managing, and monitoring the progress of project, including tracking documentation, scope creep, tracking the work during each phase, and disapproving or approving any changes along the way. So as you can see, controlling is the most critical process because in this phase you will face changes, and change is inevitable. So to make your project work, you need to do anything like tracking, managing, and monitoring, and so on and so forth to make your project great and work. And the last process is the closing. So this is the wrap up of the process, which involves an audit of the project deliverables and accessing the results of the final product against the original defined plan. Next slide. So scope planning. So the purpose of scope planning is to ensure that all the required work and the only required work is clearly identified, that the deliverables and outcomes are documented, and that the boundary conditions are adequately defined to complete the project successfully. Scope planning involves identifying the goals, objective, task, resource, budget, and timeline. Next slide. Scope management plan. A scope management plan is a bunch of process that are in place to make sure that the project includes all the necessary tasks for a successful project. The scope management plan is primarily concerned with defining how the scope is explained, developed, structured, and verified. Yeah, so the next one. So the next one is the VBS. I've mentioned it earlier if you're paying attention. So it's one of example of project scope management plan. As I said earlier, VBS is definitely one of the important process within the scope management. So in the next more slide, I will discuss why VBS is a must-have in a project scope management. So here we are. In a VBS, the deliverable can be an object, a service, or an activity. By focusing on deliverables rather than methods, the what, not the how. A work breakdown structures helps eliminate unnecessary work to get the intended result. A well thought out VBS aids in scheduling, estimating costs, and determining risks. It is usually a visual chart or diagram that spells out a project's timeline and process while capturing each task, subtask, and deliverable that will be created and executed throughout. It's often rendered as an outline, like a table of contents, but can be organized using tabs or other visual organizational system. Yeah, next one. So there are rules to create VBS. First one, include 100% pumped work necessary to complete the goal. Don't account for any amount worked twice. Focus on outcomes, not actions. Next one, a work package should take no less than 8 hours and no more than 80 hours of effort. Next, include about 3 levels of detail. And the last one, assign each work package to a specific team or individual. And next one. In this one, or in this slide, we will talk about the importance of VBS in a project management. The first one is estimate the cost of project. Second one, establish dependencies. Third one, determine a project timeline and develops a schedule. Next one, write a statement of work or SOW. Assign responsibilities and clarify roles. Track the progress of project, identify risks, and the last one is all of these benefits necessarily. So after we discuss about the rules and importance of VBS, we will go to creating a VBS. First step is record the overarching objective you are trying to accomplish. This objective could be anything from developing a new software feature to building a missile. Next one, divide the overarching project into smaller and smaller pieces, but stop before you get to the point of listing out every action that must be taken. Remember to focus on concrete deliverables rather than actions. Next one, depending on the nature of your project, start dividing by project phases, specific large deliverables of subtasks. So yeah. So this is the example of VBS or work breakdown structure. And we have here the yard project VBS. So as you can see, we have the 5 main tasks on the yard project, and they have subtasks, which make the project run smoothly because you know what to do for each task. So yeah. Scope verification is the process of formalizing acceptance of the project scope by the stakeholders. It requires reviewing work products and results to ensure that all were completed correctly and satisfactorily. Scope verification occurs at the end of each project phase, and as a part of the project closeout process, scope verification is concerned with stakeholder acceptance of the work. Work is sometimes denied and must be reworked. So, scope verification, ensuring that the deliverables in the project creates are alignment within the project scope. Or, in other words, scope verification measure the accuracy of the work up to the cancellation, not the work that was to be completed after project termination. Next one. Scope control. Scope control or control scope is a process which is probably one of the most crucial in maintaining the scope baseline and changes the scope baseline whenever necessary. The project managers will mainly look to avoid the scope creep, which is a process where the scope is expanded in an uncontrolled manner. Control scope is the process of monitoring the status of the project and the project scope and managing changes to the scope baseline. The control scope is a process which allows the scope baseline to maintain throughout the life cycle of the project. Yan. So, next one. So, here are the steps for control scope process. Measure the performance against the scope baseline. Second one, determine the magnitude of variances. Third one, decide whether corrective preventive action is needed. Next, update to scope baseline, project management plan, or project documents. Next, impact of changes should be evaluated. Yep. So, software to assist project management. So, I searched so many software, but I see this one software to assist the project management, and this is a baseline or Basecamp. So, Basecamp is a popular project management software that is widely used by many project management teams. This software offers several different collaborations features such as a designated discussion area where users can leave behind comments. Additionally, a recap of the project your team is working, including statuses and updates, is sent out on a daily basis to your email. Users can contribute to discussions via email as well. If you are unable to find a particular item, you can make use of the software powerful search tool to locate files or conversation. Some shortcomings, however, include the lack of milestones and customization options, as well as the inability to add an estimated duration for a task or assign it to more than one user. So, this is the Basecamp. So, you can search it on your browser if you want. So that is it, and this is my report for the project management process. So hope you understand, and that is so. Thank you and God bless.
Okay, so based on the discussion of Mr. Bautista that when we say scope, no, it refers to all the work involved in creating the products of the project and processes used to create them. So actually we discussed about the deliverables, no, on our chapter 2. Wherein it described the product produced, no? So the project scope management includes the processes involving the defining and controlling. So what is or is not included in a project. So it ensured the project team and the stakeholders have the same understanding of what products the project will produce and what processes the project team will use to produce them. Now, again, as Mr. Bautista mentioned earlier, no, we have 5 main processes. Okay, so the 5 main processes involve the project scope in project scope management. As what he discussed is scope planning, definition, creating work breakdown structure. That's why it's very important for you to develop a work breakdown structure, scope verification, and scope control. So the main output of the scope planning is a project, no, a project scope management plan. So the project management scope plan is a document that includes a description of how the team, no, will prepare the project scope and control request for change of the project scope. No, while of course, if we wanted to give some example of a project scope management plan, what we're going to do is, of course, to write the project name, the introduction of the project, preparing the scope statement, creating the work breakdown structure, verifying completion of project deliverables. So that's why we need also to relearn and understand again the Gantt chart, and managing requests for changes of the project scope. Another thing that we need to consider in project scope is as I mentioned, is the project charter. No? So when it comes to project charter, we need to create our project title, of course, the project start date. This will be the content of our project charter. Project finish date must be included in the project charter. Our project manager at the same time, the project objective, what will be the approach. So for example, of an approach in a project management, update the information technology inventory database to determine upgrade needs. Develop, for example, detailed cost estimate for project and report to CEO or CIO. Issue a request, no, for code to obtain hardware and software, or use internal staff as such as possible, as much as possible, for planning, analysis, and installation. Then we need to define the rules and responsibility of the member. So for example, if you are the CEO, what will be your responsibility? If you are the CIO, what will be your responsibility? For example, Juan de la Cruz, CEO, project sponsor, monitor project. Floran Bautista, CIO, monitor project, provide staff. For example, Agdon, project manager, plan and execute project. So for example, Rika, Director for Information Technology Operations, mentor, okay, mentor. Okay? For example, another is Rinabel, VP Human Resource. So she will be the one who is responsible to provide the staff, issue memo to all employees about project. And another thing, for example, Edgar, no? So Director for Purchasing. He assists in purchasing hardware. This will be the roles and responsibility under the sample of a project charter. Then we need to indicate, of course, the signature of this, how many person? CEO, CIO, Project Manager, Director of ITO, BP Human Resource, at saka Director for Purchasing. So 6 person. Then, at the bottom of your project charter will be the comments. Comments from the 6 member of the project in project charter. Now, so again, if we further defining the project scope, we need to upgrade may affect the servers, no? So preliminary scope statement, version 1, version 2, and so on and so forth. Now, in creating a work breakdown, a while ago, this is project charter. How about the work breakdown structure? So after completing, of course, the scope planning and definition processes, the next step in project scope management is to create a work breakdown structure. So a WBS is a deliverable-oriented grouping of the work involved in a project that defines the total scope of the project. So because most of project involves many people and many different deliverable, it is important to organize and divide the work into logical parts, no, based on how the work will be performed. Because the WBS is a foundation document in project management because it provides the basis for planning and managing project schedules, cost, resources, and changes. Since WBS defines the total scope of the project, some project management experts believe that work should not to be done on the project if it is not included in the work breakdown structure. So therefore, it is crucial to develop a work breakdown structure. Now, so for example, you have a plan, you're going to create a work breakdown structure developing an intranet. No? So apply an intranet. So of course, in a tabular form, for example, what you're going to do is, of course, you need to define the concept of your intranet project. No? So evaluate current system is important. Define the requirements, no? So under defining the requirements, you need to define the user requirement as what we discussed in our last meeting, define content requirements, system requirement, server owner requirements, and define specific functionality, risk and risk management approach, develop project plan, roll out, at saka yung syempre brief web development team. So right after that, you need to have a website design, website development, rollout, and the support. Another thing, of course, in executing the task, for some consultancies in work breakdown structure. So of course, executing, then survey, user inputs. For that, says a while ago, based on the given intranet example, no? So intranet site content, so templates and tools, what we're going to the content, and what are the tools that we're going to use for that intranet content, the articles, links. Kindly turn off. Okay, so again, intranet site design, of course, the intranet site construction, the site testing is important, site promotion, site rollout, and project benefits management measurement. So what will be the possible approaches in developing work breakdown structure? So as Mr. Bautista mentioned earlier, so there are several approaches actually, that you can use to develop a work breakdown structure, like using guidelines, analogy, top-down approach, bottom-up approach, and the mind mapping. So when we say analogy, that is another approach for constructing the WBS. Is the analogy approach, you use a similar project WBS as a starting point, For the top-down and bottom approaches, so to use the top-down approach, start with the largest items, of the project and break them into their subordinate items. While the bottom-up approach, team member first identify as many specific tasks related to the project as possible. While the mind mapping is a technique, that uses branches, radiating out from a core idea to structure thoughts, and ideas. Instead of writing tasks down in a list or immediately trying to create a structure for tasks, mind mapping allows people visual, no, to write and even draw pictures of ideas and nonlinear format. That is mind mapping. So a while ago, our presenter also discussed about the WBS dictionary, no? So it is a document that describe detailed information about each WBS item. So the format of WBS dictionary can vary based on project needs. It might be appropriate to have just a short paragraph describing each work package, no? And so on. So what will be the advice for creating a work breakdown structure and WBS dictionary? So there are some basic principles, however, that apply to creating any work breakdown structure and WBS dictionary. So a unit of work should appear at only one place in the WBS. The work content of WBS item is the sum of the WBS items below it. So WBS item is the responsibility of only one individual, even though many people may be working with it. No? So the WBS must be consistent at the same time. It should serve the project team first, no? And other purposes only if practical. Project team members should be involved in developing a work breakdown structure to ensure consistency and buy-in. We need to take note that each WBS item must be documented in a work breakdown structure, no? Or WBS dictionary to ensure accurate understanding of the scope of work included and not included in that item. The WBS must be flexible, no? Flexible tool to accommodate inevitable changes while properly maintaining control of the work content in the project according to the scope statement. Okay? So when it comes to scope verification, it is difficult to create a good project scope statement and WBS for a project. It even more difficult, especially on information technology projects, to verify the project scope and minimize scope changes. No? Some project teams know from the start that the scope is very unclear and that they must work closely with the project customer to design and produce various deliverables. Okay? So even when the project scope is fairly well defined, no, many information technology projects suffer from scope creep, no? Scope creep, no? The tendency for project scope to keep getting bigger and bigger. That is scope creep. Okay? So when we say scope verification, it involves formal acceptance of the complete project scope by the stakeholder. So the acceptance is often achieved by a customer inspection and then sign off the key deliverable. So to receive formal acceptance of the project scope, the project team must develop clear documentation of the project products and procedure to evaluate if they were completed correctly and satisfactorily. No, so when it comes to scope control, it involves controlling changes. Na? So we need to control the changes to the project scope. So user often are not exactly sure how they want the screens to look or for what functionality they will really need to improve business performance. So developers are not exactly sure how to interpret users' requirement, and they also have to deal with constantly changing technologies. Okay, so what will be the suggestion for improving user input? Okay, develop a good project selection process for information technology projects. Have a users on the project team better, no? So if, for example, if the person, if your targeted users are available to be a member of a team, it's better. Okay, you need to have a regular meeting with defined agendas, no? Deliver something to project users is sponsored on a regular basis. Do not promise to deliver, no, what cannot be delivered in a particular time frame. Co-locate users with the developers. Okay, what will be the suggestion for reducing incomplete and changing requirements? So develop and follow a requirements management process that includes procedures for initial requirements, no, determination. Enjoy or you may employ, no, you may employ techniques such as prototyping, use user requirements, no, and others, no. So when we say prototyping, it must be involving developing a working replica of the system or some aspect of the system. While the use case modeling is a process for identifying modeling business events, who initiated them. And I think you've heard already the JAD, no? The Joint Application Design. No? Use highly organized and intensive workshop to bring together project stakeholders, the sponsors, the users, the information, the business analysts, the programmers, and so on to jointly define and design information system. These techniques also help users become more active in defining system requirements. We need also to put all requirements in writing and keep them current and really available. Okay? Create a requirements management database for documentation and controlling requirements. Provide adequate testing is also important to verify that the projects perform as expected. Use a process of reviewing requested requirement changes from a system perspective. Emphasize completion dates. Always, you need to emphasize when the project completed. Allocate resources, especially for handling change requests. Okay? So again, the project scope management includes the process required to ensure that the project addresses all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. So the main process include the scope planning, scope definition, work breakdown structure, creation, no, scope, verification, and the scope control. Okay, so again, poor project management is one of the key reasons project fails. So for information technology projects, it is important for good project scope management to have a strong user involvement, a clear statement of requirements, and a process for managing scope changes. There are many software products available, no, to assist in project scope management. So the WBS is a key concept in properly using project management software since it provides the basis for entering tasks. So I think that's it for this discussion.